Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a warrior. Not really. You're what's left when the war ends and no one remembers to tell you. You were born samurai, taught to bow, to bleed, to serve, but the world moved on while you were still tightening the straps of your armour. Now the trains whistle past your village. The Empress smiles from a photograph. And your sword, once sacred, is technically illegal. You keep it anyway. Not because you expect to use it, but because you don't know how to be without it. Before dawn breaks over the slope of Shiroyama, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. There's something oddly comforting about knowing who's listening to these stories from around the world. If you'd like early access to more of these slow, sad declines into historical oblivion, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You are born in a house with a wooden floor that creaks even when no one walks on it, beneath a sagging thatch roof that lets in wind but not sunlight. The walls are thin, the paper doors patched, and the hearth smokes no matter how carefully it's tended. Your mother gives birth to you squatting near the fire, alone but for the midwife, and a silent prayer to gods who no longer answer. Outside, the plum trees stand bare, their branches still black from winter, and somewhere down the hill, the first crows of the season pick apart the straw of an abandoned stable. It isn't an auspicious morning, but then you aren't born into an age of omens, only into an age of slow erosion. Your family name still means something, at least on paper. A scroll rests in the alcove of the main room, its calligraphy faded, its edges frayed, tracing your lineage back to men who once rode into battle behind daimyo banners, cutting down Mongol invaders or rival clans, depending on the century. Your father sometimes points to it when he's had too much sake and the room grows too quiet. He doesn't read it aloud. He just stares as if trying to remember who those men were and whether they'd recognise him in this cold, unremarkable house with its leaking roof and rice paper patched with scraps of cloth. By the time you're old enough to ask what the scroll says, the ink has faded past legibility. You don't know you're poor. Not at first. You think the cracked sandals on your feet are simply how sandals are meant to look. You think the pickled radish and leftover barley you eat for breakfast is what every child in Japan eats, and that everyone's father has a cough in winter and disappears into the forest when taxes are due. The other children in the village wear the same worn clothes, speak in the same low voices, and duck the same way when a government official rides past on a horse with foreign buckles. But even then, there are cracks. A new neighbour who doesn't bow properly. A man in strange black boots, asking too many questions. A merchant woman with Western fabric in her cart. Things shift, but you're too small to notice. Your father isn't a cruel man, but he's made from harder stuff than most things in your world. His hands are like bark, his back never straightens, and he speaks in proverbs more often than plain words. He trains you with the bokken before you can write your own name. You learn to stand still until your legs tremble, to strike without pausing to consider why. Not because you need to fight, there's no one left to fight, but because that's what's always been done. Discipline is the point. Endurance is the goal. Questions aren't welcome. Modern schools are for children in cities, and you are not one of them. Your mother never smiles in front of guests. She knows her place, which means knowing how to shrink. When she speaks, it's soft and direct, and when she moves, it's with the small, calculated efficiency of someone trained to take up as little space as possible. She keeps the household ledger with care, though there's little to record beyond debt. Sometimes you hear her crying behind the shoji screen, always at night, always briefly. No one mentions it the next morning. Honour requires silence. Dignity lives in restraint, especially in sorrow. There was a time, you're told, when samurai are feared, when they take food from a merchant's stall without paying, when their swords are license and their top knots are badges of deference. But by the time you're born, Those days are already dying in the throat. The merchant class has money now. The government declares all men equal in the eyes of the emperor, though some eyes see more equally than others. You learn this not from edicts, but from watching your father bow to a man who wears silk slippers and smells of imported cologne. That's when you begin to suspect the world has rules that don't match the ones you're being taught. Your family still holds onto its swords, 2 of them, the katana and wakizashi, wrapped in cloth and kept in a lacquered chest behind the altar. You aren't allowed to touch them, not even to look too directly when the chest is opened for cleaning. They aren't weapons anymore. They're relics, symbols, burdens. When you ask your father if he's ever used them, he says no. Then after a long silence, he says he hopes you never will. You don't understand why his voice sounds like someone closing a door. The temple monk visits once a season to recite sutras and drink free tea. He smells of mould and camphor and repeats the same aphorisms every visit, about duty and impermanence, about how even the mightiest pine must one day fall. He's one of the few people your father doesn't correct. Sometimes they sit together for hours without speaking, just listening to the wind in the trees and the occasional cry of a distant crow. You watch them once through the doorway and think they look like 2 statues forgotten in a forest, slowly weathering into moss. One afternoon, when you're 7, your father opens the sword chest and beckons you forward. You don't breathe. The blade is dark from age, but still clean, polished at the edge like it expects something. He doesn't hand it to you. He just lets you look. Really look. It isn't heavy in your hands because it's not meant for you to wield. Not physically. Not yet. But even at that age, you feel it. The weight. Not of steel, but of expectation. Of inheritance. Of a life chosen long before you learn how to speak. He tells you the sword belonged to your grandfather, and his father before that, and so on. Back to someone who once stood behind a daimyo on a blood-soaked field no one remembers. He says it isn't your weapon, not yet, but it is your burden. To keep, to respect, to carry forward, even if there's no war left to fight and no banner left to serve. You nod, because that's what you're supposed to do. You don't know what it means. You don't yet understand that by the time you come of age, carrying that sword will be a kind of quiet rebellion, a crime dressed as reverence. But you remember how it looks in the fading light, and how your father looks when he closes the chest again. Not proud, not hopeful, just tired. You rise before the sun, whether you want to or not. The house is always cold in the morning, even in summer, and your fingers fumble with the stiff ties of your robe as you dress quickly, trying not to wake your younger siblings. Outside, the courtyard stones are slick with dew, and your sandals slap against them with a sound that somehow feels disrespectful, though no one ever says so. Your tutor arrives at the same time each day, an old man with eyebrows thicker than his patience, carrying a cane he rarely uses for walking. He never raises his voice, but somehow that makes the disappointment in it worse. Training is never about improvement. It is about repetition. Not to grow, but to preserve. You are taught how to sit, how to bow, how to hold your bokken at just the right angle, not for efficiency, but for form. The kata are ancient, or so you're told, though even the tutor admits no one quite remembers what some of them originally meant. You practice anyway, over and over, even when the gestures feel like pantomime, even when your muscles ache from stillness more than from strain. Discipline is the point. Endurance is the goal. Questions are unwelcome. You are sculpting yourself into something respectable, not useful. There are lessons in calligraphy too, but always in the old style. You learn to write characters whose meanings are already being replaced by modern forms, taught by a man who refuses to acknowledge that government documents now favour horizontal script. History lessons cover battles no one remembers, and dynasties that no longer rule. When you once ask about the emperor, the new emperor, the living one, your tutor pauses for several seconds before changing the subject. You never ask again. Meals are quiet. Your family follows the old etiquette. Father served first, mother waits, and no one speaks unless addressed. You are expected to eat everything, even when it's bitter or obviously spoiled. Waste is dishonourable. Displeasure is undignified. You learn early that suffering in silence is a virtue, and that children are not seen as individuals, but as symbols of continuity, of tradition, of whatever pride still clings to your family name. That means never interrupting, never contradicting, never drawing attention unless commanded. You are not being raised to live, you are being raised to represent. Festivals come and go, their meanings worn thin like old cloth. You dress in garments passed down from cousins you barely remember, and march through the village behind a paper lantern on a stick. The elders sing songs none of you understand anymore, and the shrine maiden offers rice wine to statues that have long since lost their names. No one believes, not really, but belief isn't the point, participation is. These rituals have no power, but they have weight, the kind that settles into your bones after generations and becomes indistinguishable from duty. When your friends in the village begin attending the new school, the one opened by a government official with a stiff hat and sharper teeth, your parents forbid you from joining them. They speak of contamination, of foreign values, of the erosion of honour. You watch the other boys walk off in clean cotton uniforms, while you remain behind to sweep the veranda and memorise verses from books no longer printed. You don't envy them, not yet, but you do wonder what they're learning that makes their fathers so proud, and what it means that your father never asks. There are still sword lessons, though the tone has shifted. What was once preparation has become reenactment. Your bokken never touches another, not because you're skilled, but because sparring is deemed too aggressive, too risky, too unseemly. The strikes are measured and solitary, like prayers recited aloud to no one in particular. Your father corrects your posture from time to time, but he does so with less conviction each year, as though he remembers the shape of authority, but not the substance. You begin to feel that the movements exist for themselves, alone. You are practicing discipline in a vacuum. The first time you see a government soldier up close, you're startled by the way he stands. Casual, confident, arms resting by his side, as if nothing in the world could touch him. His uniform is blue, his belt gleams, and he carries a rifle with a metal bayonet that looks crude and efficient. He is younger than your father, older than you, and entirely uninterested in your presence. He doesn't bow, doesn't even glance your way, just walks past your family's gate like it isn't there. That evening your father sits in the garden longer than usual, staring out across the stone path, saying nothing. You aren't sure if he's angry or afraid. You still aren't. Eventually, the summons comes. You are to have your first formal audience with your daimyo. It has been delayed for months. Illness, travel, matters of state. But now the letter arrives, written in stiff brushstrokes and sealed with red wax. You are dressed in ceremonial robes that haven't been worn since your older brother's death. They smell of incense and mildew, and the sleeves are slightly too long. Your hair is oiled and tied, your hands are scrubbed until the skin stings. You are not to speak unless prompted. You are not to ask questions. You are to kneel, bow, and show gratitude. The estate is grand but neglected. The gravel path is swept, but weeds peek through the edges. The lanterns are polished, but the gates sag slightly on their hinges. You are led through corridors lined with scrolls and screens, each more faded than the last, and finally into a large empty room where the daimyo sits behind a low table, flanked by two elderly retainers, who look more skeletal than ceremonial. He doesn't smile, doesn't stand. He gestures vaguely for you to come forward, his hand trembling slightly, as if unused to giving orders. His voice, when he speaks, is dry and hollow, as though reading from a script he never wrote. He asks your name. You give it. He asks your father's name. You give that too. He nods once, then tells you that you carry a proud lineage, that the clan is counting on its youth, and that the values of the past will shape the future. You bow deeply and thank him, though the words catch in your throat. The meeting lasts 6 minutes. He dismisses you without ceremony, and you're escorted out the side entrance, past stacked crates of documents labelled in modern script. On the way home, your father says little. But when you reach the edge of the village, he stops, looks back toward the estate, and lets out a long, quiet breath that sounds almost like a question. You begin to realise the world is changing. It begins with rumours, not edicts, not soldiers, not great upheavals marching through your village, just stories whispered by passing traders or muttered between farmers at the edge of the fields. There's a railway being built in the north, they say, a line of iron that stretches farther than any ox cart could travel in a week. Messages fly across wires like lightning now, crossing whole provinces in the time it takes you to finish morning sword drills. Somewhere near Tokyo, men wear shoes made of polished leather and dine with forks, and you hear that one of them even cut his hair short, like a foreigner. No one laughs. The stories used to seem ridiculous. Now they seem inevitable. You don't see these changes directly, not yet, but they leak into your world like water under a paper door. One day you notice that the merchant who brings cloth from Kagoshima now uses smaller coin purses. Another week, a farmer who once nodded respectfully now offers only a curt glance. Someone mentions the phrase conscription lottery, though no one in your village quite understands what that means. One boy disappears for a season and returns with a shaven head and a posture so stiff you'd think his bones had been replaced. He doesn't carry a sword. He carries a book. You try to talk to him, but the words feel wrong in your mouth and irrelevant in his. At the shrine, offerings grow thinner. The rice is older, the coin smaller, the prayers quieter. You begin to wonder if the gods have gone elsewhere, perhaps taken a train north, toward the clamour and smoke and steel of the emperor's new capital. Even the monk who visits your family each season starts to arrive late and leave early. He speaks less about ancestral wisdom and more about change, not in condemnation, but with a kind of gentle resignation, like someone describing a storm that cannot be outrun. The old ways are becoming stories, he says once, without looking at you. And soon, stories will be all they are. In your household, silence becomes more than custom. It becomes a defence. Your father trains you with the bokken as before, but there is a dullness in his movements now. Like the body remembers what the mind no longer trusts. He no longer corrects you as quickly. When you stumble, he pauses before responding, as though deciding whether it's still worth the effort. He sharpens the blade less often. He writes in the family ledger less often. He looks out across the hills more often, and when you ask what he's thinking, he says only, "Clouds are moving in." Your mother adjusts as mothers do. She trades with newer merchants. She stops asking your father before making certain decisions. Once, she suggests that your youngest sibling might attend the modern school after all, just for basic reading and arithmetic. Your father says nothing, but the silence is not approval. It's surrender. Your sister goes. The next week she corrects your handwriting during morning practice. Your mother hides a smile. You do not. One morning, a man arrives in your village wearing Western shoes and speaking unaccented Japanese. He claims to be from the Ministry of Education, though his robes look more like a costume than a uniform. He speaks to your tutor. He speaks to your father. He measures your family's rice allotment and takes notes in a bound leather book. You aren't told what he says, but afterward, your tutor begins to miss lessons. Once a week at first, then twice, then all together. The courtyard grows quiet. Your form degrades. No one corrects it. More officials pass through. Soldiers, clerks, men with faces shaved clean and boots that don't sink in the mud. They talk about roads, schools, taxes, conscription. They talk in the language of certainty, of progress, of efficiency. They speak with the confidence of men whose paths are paved and who've never had to kneel for anything. they didn't choose. You listen from doorways, from behind fences, from the shadows of gates. You hear your world being translated into numbers, charts and rules, not to be preserved, but to be reorganized. You begin to notice things vanishing. The blacksmith stops making blades. The shrine sells off its bronze fittings. The old storyteller disappears without a word, and no one thinks to ask where he's gone. Ceremonies grow shorter. Bows grow shallower. Rituals collapse into gestures, and then into nothing. You're not sure when it happens, but one day you realize you can walk through the village without anyone noticing your family crest. You're just another figure in a thinning crowd. Your presence no longer assumed. Your status no longer relevant. Your father grows quieter. His hands shake more often. He stops wearing the formal haori unless guests are present, and even then, the fabric sags around him like a borrowed skin. One night, over weak tea, he admits he once dreamed of sending you to serve in a noble household. A retainer, he says softly, as if the word itself belongs to another language. A real post, maybe even Kyoto. You don't ask why he didn't. You already know the answer. There are no posts. There is no Kyoto, not the way he means it. There's only a city now, filled with rail lines and factories and men with rubber soles who no longer bow. And then one day it happens, not with ceremony, not with prophecy, but with a whisper and a smirk. A merchant passes through just after the rain, carrying foreign spices wrapped in paper and tiny glass bottles that smell like alcohol and soap. He sells nothing to your family. He doesn't need to. But as he packs his cart, he reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a folded scrap, pale blue, crisper than silk, printed with fine lines and stamped with a symbol you don't recognize. New currency, he says. Good anywhere now. You take it, turn it over in your hands. It's too soft, too light. There's no weight to it, no edge, no memory. It's a promise made out of ink. You hand it back and bow, because that's what you've been taught. He nods, distracted, already walking on. Behind him, his boots leave shallow prints in the damp soil. You watch them disappear before they dry. That night, you dream of holding your father's katana in one hand and the paper bill in the other. The weight is all on one side. And it's not the side you expect. Your coming-of-age ceremony takes place on a grey morning with no wind. The sky hangs low and silent, and the courtyard stones are still slick from a night's light drizzle. You wear a formal hakama that belonged to your brother before his illness, ironed stiff and tight around the waist, as if it's trying to shape you into someone older than you are. The air smells faintly of mould and smoke. You have bathed, shaved and bowed. You kneel before the family altar, while your father chants the ancestral names, his voice low and slow, pausing between each one, like he's listening for an answer that never comes. No guests are invited, no celebration follows. This is not that kind of ceremony. It is quiet, private and mandatory. The formal acknowledgement that you are now accountable for everything expected of you, even if no one can quite define what those expectations are anymore. You drink bitter tea and accept the white envelope handed to you by your father. Inside is a folded slip of paper bearing your new adult name, one chosen for its history, not its meaning. A name shared by a man who once served a warlord, whose story has been worn thin by centuries of retelling. You bow and thank your father. You are now a man. You do not feel like one. The household treats you differently after that, but only in subtle ways. Your mother no longer reminds you to bow before entering a room. Your younger siblings begin to address you with slightly more formality. When there is heavy lifting to be done, you're expected to do it without being asked. When your father speaks, he assumes you're listening even when you aren't. You eat last now, not as a sign of disrespect, but because responsibility comes after everyone else has been served. No one says any of this aloud. It is simply understood. You step into it like a robe that doesn't quite fit. You receive a new bokken, longer and heavier than your childhood one. It is handed to you by your tutor without comment. He does not test your grip or offer corrections. He only watches as you go through the motions of the same forms you've been practicing for years. The movements are familiar, but they feel different now, not because you've changed, but because you realise no one else has. The world beyond the training yard grows louder, faster, stranger. But here, nothing moves unless you make it. You begin to see the cracks more clearly. The clan elders no longer visit the estate. The local tax collector arrives in Western clothing, carrying a ledger printed in uniform type. The banners that once hung from the village gate are taken down for cleaning and never put back up. You hear talk that the local shrine will be decommissioned, that the funds are being redirected to a school or perhaps a train station. The rumours are never confirmed, but the absence speaks for itself. Even the monk who once offered seasonal prayers now skips entire visits. When he does arrive, he brings newspapers instead of scrolls and folds them carefully when he thinks your father isn't looking. Your father continues your training, but his movements grow slower. Sometimes he corrects you out of habit, then stops mid-sentence, uncertain whether the mistake was yours or his. He begins to favour his left knee, and the mornings he spends in the courtyard grow shorter with each passing week. He still tells you stories of battles fought, of loyalty rewarded, but the endings feel increasingly forced, like conclusions meant to comfort rather than instruct. You nod when you're supposed to, but the words land differently now. Not false exactly, just borrowed. One night you overhear your parents speaking in the next room. Your father says your name. Your mother replies with something soft, indistinct. You catch the words position and appointment, and then more sharply, too proud. The conversation ends with silence. You do not ask what it was about. You already know. You are not being considered for any of the new posts being handed out by the government. Not a clerk, not a translator, not even a railway inspector. Your family has not submitted your name, not because you're unqualified, but because you're still trying to be something the world no longer asks for. When you walk through the village, people no longer nod the way they once did. Some look away, others offer a polite but shallow bow, as if unsure whether you still warrant the full gesture. You carry yourself with the same posture, the same discipline, the same awareness of lineage. But now you begin to notice how easily those things can be ignored. A merchant passes you on the road and calls you young master, with a tone too casual to be sincere. A tax official arrives and addresses your father by his first name. When your mother protests, he shrugs and points to a paper pinned to his ledger. Everyone's equal now, he says, before walking off. You try not to let it show, but you feel it, the steady peeling away of layers you've spent your life learning to wear. The rituals continue, but they are no longer recognised. The bow holds no weight. The sword is not protection. The name carries no promise. You go through the motions anyway, not because you still believe in them, but because you don't yet know what else to do. Then the letter arrives. It comes folded in a military envelope, crisp and impersonal. Your cousin in Kagoshima, a boy only a year older than you, raised under the same values, trained by the same teachers, has been conscripted into the new Imperial Army. He writes in clean script, more legible than you remember, and signs his name with a different family mark. His message is formal, distant, as if dictated by someone standing just behind him. He thanks your family for their influence. He notes his new posting, his unit, the monthly pay. He says he's been issued a uniform, a rifle, and a number. The sword he inherited, the one your grandfather gave him, has been taken. He is no longer permitted to carry it. You read the letter 3 times. Your father reads it once and places it under the tea tray, without comment. That night, you walk to the back of the house and open the sword chest. You do not touch the blade, you simply look at it. You wonder what it would mean to wear it now, not in defiance, not in ceremony, but in public, as if it were still yours, as if it still mattered. The next morning, you return to the courtyard for training. Your father does not join you. The notice arrives like all government orders now, printed, formal, unsigned by any human hand. A folded slip of paper with crisp black type pinned to the message board beside the temple, sealed with the emblem of the Ministry of War. There are no town criers anymore, no samurai on horseback reading proclamations, just ink and paper, words and rules. You read the decree in silence, standing among farmers, shopkeepers, and two men in shirt sleeves who never remove their hats. The language is simple, unadorned. Effective immediately, no civilian, including those of former samurai status, may carry a sword in public. You stare at the notice longer than necessary, not because it's unclear, but because your body refuses to accept it. Your hand drifts unconsciously to your side, where your sword still rests, not drawn, not threatening, just present. The way it has always been. The weight of it is not just familiar, it is anchoring. Your body has shaped itself around that presence. And now the government says it must go. Not just the steel, but the right to wear it. The right to exist in public as something more than another body in the street. No one says anything for several moments. The villagers disperse slowly, murmuring among themselves. A few look back at you, then look away. A man you've known since childhood gives you a shallow bow that ends before it begins. You walk home without speaking, each footfall louder than it should be. The sword does not feel heavier, but your spine does. You pass two boys in school uniforms, neither of whom turns their head to acknowledge you. You are not invisible. You are something worse, something irrelevant. That night, you sit across from your father while he reads the decree by candlelight. His eyes move slowly, not because the print is hard to see, but because he already knows what it says. The paper trembles slightly in his hand. When he finishes, he folds it once, sets it beside the inkstone, and exhales. He does not speak, neither do you. The room is quiet except for the fire, which cracks once and then fades into embers. There is no discussion because there is no debate. Law does not require agreement, only obedience. In the morning, you leave your sword on the rack by the doorway. Your hand hesitates over the scabbard, unsure whether it should touch it one last time. Instead, you bow to it, out of habit or defiance, you're not sure. Then you walk to the village without it. The road feels longer. Your gait feels off balance. The breeze cuts more sharply against your side, as if mocking the space where the blade once hung. No one comments. No one notices. You blend into the crowd too easily. And it is that ease, that quiet, seamless absorption, that wounds more deeply than any blade ever could. Throughout the day, you see others stripped in the same way. Former retainers, old warriors, sons of noble lines, all walking without their swords. Some still wearing the obi, as if to keep a ghost in place. A few hold themselves proudly, as if to remind the world of who they were. Others slump, as though a central beam has been removed from their bodies. You watch an elderly man in ceremonial robes grip the hilt of a cane that used to be a wakizashi, and you wonder if he remembers how it felt to draw it in anger, or if that memory has softened into shame. The sword ban is not a battlefield defeat. It is not loud or sudden or soaked in blood. It is something quieter and colder, a surgical removal of purpose. The blade is not confiscated. You are still allowed to own it. You may polish it, admire it, pass it down to children who will never be permitted to wear it. But it must remain indoors, like a painting or a funeral urn. The message is clear. The sword is no longer a tool, no longer a symbol. It is a memory. And the world has no need for more of those. You clean your katana for the last time that evening. You wipe the blade with a cloth that has been used for generations, now fraying at the corners. You oil the steel with care, watching the light catch along the edge, like it still wants to be dangerous. You do not rush. Each motion is deliberate, reverent, final. Your fingers linger on the hilt, remembering the first time your father placed it in your hands. He did not smile then. You understand now that he could not. The chest sits in the corner of the main room, lacquered black, its lid slightly warped from years of humidity. You place the sword inside with both hands, laying it across the folded silk as gently as a body prepared for cremation. The wakizashi rests beside it, shorter, lighter, but no less dead. You arrange the cloth, check the lock twice, and lower the lid. The hinges creak. The wood groans. Then it shuts with a deep, dull thud, a sound that echoes in your stomach. Like the closing of a temple gate, like the sealing of a tomb. You do not weep. That is not the way. Instead, you sit beside the chest and wait for the silence to settle. Your mother walks past the doorway, but says nothing. Your father remains outside, staring into the darkness beyond the garden. The sword is not gone. It still exists, but its presence now feels ceremonial, like incense burned for the dead. You begin to understand that the real weapon wasn't the blade. It was the permission to carry it, to be seen with it, to be feared, or at least respected. And now that permission is gone. That night, you dream of yourself walking into the village, wearing your sword proudly, and no one noticing, no one reacting, no one remembering what it meant. In the dream, you draw the blade and hold it high. The steel reflects the sun. The people around you blink and keep walking. You shout something, but the words dissolve into wind. You wake before you finish speaking, and even then, the silence lingers. In the morning, you pass the chest without looking. You no longer bow. Then come more changes. It does not happen in one sweeping decree, but in pieces, small polite announcements printed in the official bulletin, each one dissolving something that used to matter. First, your domain is renamed, not abolished, just reorganized. The banners are taken down, the boundaries redrawn. The word Han disappears from maps and documents, replaced with prefecture lines that no one in your village understands. Then your stipend vanishes, not stolen, not even revoked, simply converted into something they call merit-based compensation, which requires an application, a ledger, and an explanation of your usefulness to the state. You do not apply. You already know the answer. Your father says little when the money stops. He simply adjusts. The meals grow smaller. The garden is tilled again, not for discipline, but for food. Your mother begins mending clothes instead of replacing them. The servants leave quietly, one by one, without farewells. You take on their duties without being told. The paper walls grow thin. The well grows slow. You do not complain, because there's no one left to complain to. The chain of command has broken. The title remains, but the structure beneath it has turned to dust. Your daimyo, your lord, your centre of gravity, does not summon you for months. His retainers stop visiting the village altogether. The road to the estate becomes overgrown. You hear that his court has shrunk to 5 men and a young cousin studying English. No guards, no scribes, no banners, no power. Only a name that once commanded fear, now repeated in bureaucratic tones by junior officials who need somewhere to place him on a chart. Kazoku, they call him now, a peer of the realm, a title that tastes like resignation. When the summons finally comes, it's written in modern script on coarse government stationery, folded clumsily and delivered without ceremony. No courier, no crest, just a man in a bowler hat who mispronounces your name and hands it over like a receipt. Your father opens the letter and stares at it for several minutes before passing it to you. His hands do not shake this time. They simply rest on the table as if nothing more is required of them. You read it twice. The words are clear, but the tone is strange. Your daimyo requests your presence, but not your service. He wishes to speak, not command. He signs it with his personal seal, not his title. You walk to the estate alone, wearing formal clothes that feel heavier than armour. The gravel path has been swept, but not recently. Moss creeps along the edges. The outer gate is open, but no one greets you. You enter through the side door. The walls are bare, the lanterns unlit. You hear voices echoing through a distant hall, not in courtly tones, but clipped and nasal, like clerks discussing inventory. A man walks past you, carrying a stack of books labelled in kanji you can't decipher. He does not bow. He does not stop. You are led to a sitting room that once held scrolls of poetry and paintings of ancestral battles. Now it holds a filing cabinet. The table is the same, but the floor creaks more than it used to. The room smells of tea and mildew and something chemical you can't name. Your daimyo enters quietly, wearing a robe that no longer fits him and slippers that scrape the tatami. He sits across from you without preamble. His beard is thinner. His eyes are clouded. His hands twitch slightly as he pours the tea. The silence stretches longer than it should. You bow deeply. He nods in return. There are no formalities now, because there is no structure left to support them. He asks how your family's managing. You say they are adjusting. He nods again, slower this time. He does not ask about your training, your discipline, or your plans. Instead, he asks if you have considered applying for civil service. There are positions, he says, his voice barely audible over the sound of distant drawers opening and closing. Clerks, translators, inspectors, they need educated men. The word need feels misplaced. It has no weight behind it. You do not answer. Not because you're defiant, but because you do not know how to speak to him now. Your loyalty still exists. It lives in your posture, in your silence, in the way you refuse to interrupt, but it has nowhere to land. It floats between you like incense smoke, lingering, pointless. The room is too quiet. The tea is too bitter. The shape of this conversation feels wrong. You are no longer a retainer, and he is no longer a lord. You are two men dressed in fading symbols, pretending not to notice what has been taken from both of you. He says something about the future, about the Emperor's vision, about the importance of adaptation. The words sound rehearsed, like they were given to him by someone younger, someone with a desk and a timetable. He says it's better this way, that the old system was too rigid, too backward. He does not meet your eyes when he says it. His hand grips the teacup a little too tightly. He drinks quickly, as if trying to swallow the taste of his own approval. You nod, because that is what you have always done. You nod even though you feel the ground shifting beneath you, even though the room around you is being eaten by paper and policy. You nod because the only alternative is to ask what happens next. And you already know no one can answer that. Not anymore. Outside the room, a door slams. Laughter echoes from a hallway that used to hold armour racks. A clerk drops something made of metal. Your daimyo flinches slightly, then smooths his robe with hands that can no longer command. He thanks you for coming. You bow once more and rise. He does not walk you out. He stays seated, staring into the empty space where a portrait used to hang. You walk back through the estate, past rooms filled with ledgers and boxes and pale young men with pens behind their ears. You pass a wall where your family's crest once hung. It has been scraped off. Not violently, just efficiently. You reach the gate and pause. You look back once, but the building doesn't look like a domain anymore. It looks like an office. It sounds like a bank. It feels like something has died and no one held a funeral. You do not speak of the visit when you return home. Your father does not ask. That evening, you sit by the hearth and polish your sandals. There is no reason to. They have not been worn down, but the motion is familiar. It gives your hand something to do. Your sword remains locked in its chest. The ink from the decree still stains the corner of the family altar. Your lord is alive, but the position is gone. You're still loyal, but there is nothing left to serve. One day, you receive an offer. The man who offers you the position arrives on foot. Though his boots suggest he is used to rail travel, he introduces himself with a deep bow, lower than necessary, as if to show that hierarchy now belongs to paperwork rather than blood. His robe is cut short at the sleeves, revealing a pressed white shirt beneath, and he wears his hair cropped close to his head in a style that makes your fingers itch. He does not comment on your family's history or your household status. He gets straight to the point. There is a vacancy in the local administration office. He believes you are a good fit. He hands you a form, already partially filled out. Your name, your father's name, your prefecture code. The rest is blank. Age, height, literacy level, arithmetic skills, availability. He says it is a clerical role, filing reports, copying orders, assisting with tax ledgers. You would receive a small stipend. Enough to eat, perhaps enough to repair the roof tiles that have begun to sag. The position is stable, he says. Predictable. Modern. It comes with a uniform. You would no longer be permitted to wear the hakama or carry a sword, even ceremonially. But you wouldn't need to. Those are not part of the ministry's dress code. You ask if the role has any connection to the local daimyo. He blinks, then he smiles, polite and shallow, and explains that the daimyo is now a symbolic presence. A noble peer, he says, without administrative jurisdiction. The ministry appreciates the loyalty of former samurai families, but policy is now standardized. Merit-based, egalitarian. He speaks with the comfortable confidence of a man who believes these words are both generous and final. You are not sure if he pities you or simply forgets you as soon as he looks away. Your father listens to the offer in silence. He nods when appropriate, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes never quite meeting the recruiter's. He does not interrupt, he does not object, but when the man leaves, your father does not speak for a long time. He simply takes the paper form from your hands and places it on the altar next to the incense bowl, as though to ask the ancestors whether this is what survival looks like now. You watch the form sit there for 2 days. No one moves it, no one fills it out. You spend those days walking through the village, not out of purpose but to see how many others have already agreed. You count hats, uniforms, pens tucked behind ears. You see boys you once trained with, now entering buildings with glass windows and typewriters inside. Their postures have changed. Shoulders rounded forward, heads slightly bowed, hands no longer used for anything heavier than a stack of papers. You recognize the shape of obedience in them, but not the weight. It is not the obedience of discipline. It is the obedience of design. Manufactured and smooth. One man you once called senpai now works at the rail station. You see him checking tickets, punching holes with a brass tool that fits neatly in his palm. He wears spectacles now, though you know he once could strike a bamboo post from 10 paces without blinking. You consider speaking to him, but the words don't come. His eyes meet yours briefly, then flick away. Not in shame, in disinterest. You are a part of something he has left behind, like a wooden sword or a crumpled scroll. Something quaint, something irrelevant. At night, your mother sets 2 extra bowls on the table, even though no guests are expected. She doesn't mention the job, but she keeps glancing at the altar where the form still rests. The family's rice stores are low. The harvest was poor. Your youngest sibling needs new shoes. You know these things without being told. They live in the corners of your mother's face, in the quiet way she folds her sleeves tighter to her wrists, in the half smile she gives when your father talks about old court customs. She will not ask you to accept the job. She will not shame you. She will only wait. When you sleep, your dreams are fragmented. You see yourself behind a desk, pen in hand, copying figures into a ledger you cannot read. You are wearing a grey uniform that smells of starch and old paper. Your sword hangs on the wall behind you, encased in glass. No one looks at it. No one looks at you. Outside, trains whistle past the window. and the sound drowns out your voice when you try to speak. You return to the ministry office 3 days later, dressed in formal robes that already feel like they belong to someone else. The recruiter welcomes you back with a smile too wide to be sincere. He offers you a seat, pours tea, presents the form again. This time, it is clipped to a board. A pen has been placed beside it. He explains the benefits once more. Stability, order, position. He speaks of the future with the certainty of someone who has never had to question his place in it. You do not interrupt. You do not argue. You wait until he is finished, then bow once, deep, deliberate, final. You thank him for his time. You decline the offer. You leave the form untouched. The recruiter begins to say something, but your bow lasts long enough to make it awkward to continue. When you rise, his mouth closes. You turn and walk out without looking back. Outside, the road is crowded with men in short coats and western hats. No one moves aside. No one stops. You walk among them, unarmed, unnamed, unnoticed. Your robes brush against their sleeves, but they do not register the difference. You are no longer feared. You are no longer followed. You are something else now, tolerated. You reach the edge of the village and pause. Behind you, the office windows glow with lamplight and purpose. Ahead, the path winds into evening mist. That night, you burn the form at the family altar. You do not explain why, no one asks. The ashes curl into the air and vanish. You watch them go and feel neither pride nor shame. Only the slow confirmation that you no longer belong to the world being built around you. Something shifts, not loudly, not all at once, but enough that you notice the weight of silence beginning to change. The newspapers grow vague, the government men speak more cautiously, and the whispers start again, not of reform or railroads this time, but of resistance. Word spreads, quietly but quickly, that Saigo Takamori has left the government. The man who once helped shape the new order has walked away from it. Returned to Satsuma. Refused the Western clothes, the foreign advisors, the slow suffocation of everything you were taught to hold sacred. They say he's gathering men, not to protest, to rise. You hear it from a rice merchant first, pretending to inspect his wares while listening too closely to the man beside him. Then from an old retainer on the temple steps, murmuring to no one in particular. Finally from your own father, who says nothing but lights incense at the altar that night, without waiting for a festival. The smoke hangs in the air longer than it should. No one eats much the next morning. More rumours follow. Young men have begun training again, not in gyms or barracks, but in forests and ravines, where the trees still remember what it means to kneel in reverence. Swords are being taken out of storage. Gunpowder, real gunpowder, not ceremonial firecrackers, is being traded beneath lantern light. Men who once pressed stamps and signed forms are now washing old armour with vinegar and prayer. You pass one of them on your walk to the well. His hakama is too tight and his blade dull, but his eyes are focused in a way you haven't seen in years. The government issues no response at first. That silence feels louder than anything they could print. Officials stop appearing in rural outposts. Trains are delayed. A few tax collectors resign quietly and vanish before morning. No one asks where they've gone. No one sends replacements. There is a hush to the air now. Not fear, but expectation. The way people move just a little faster without knowing why. The way eyes linger on hills as if waiting for the past to come walking down them in sandals and lacquered armour. In the evenings, you sit outside and watch the trees. You try to remember the names of the sword forms you practiced as a boy. Your muscles remember them better than your mouth does. You find your feet shifting into stances again, your hands tracing empty air as if grasping something just out of reach. The rhythm returns slowly. Your breath slows. Your posture corrects itself. The motions don't feel useful. Not yet, but they feel true. Then one evening, a visitor comes to your home. He is not wearing a uniform, but he might as well be. He bows to your father and to you too, not as a superior, but as a fellow. He speaks plainly. Saigo is gathering men in Kagoshima, not just samurai but students, farmers, sons of merchants who remember who their grandfathers were. He says there may be fighting, there may be no victory, but there will be meaning. There will be a chance to stand for something before it disappears entirely. He does not ask you to come. He simply tells you where the others will be. Then he bows again and leaves before your father finishes his second breath. Your mother doesn't speak for a long time. When she finally rises to clear the tea, her hands do not tremble. The house is quiet after she leaves. Your father looks at you, but not like he used to. He does not command. He does not instruct. He simply nods once, small, tired, but certain. The kind of nod a man gives when he sees a door opening behind a wall that's been there too long. Then he rises and walks to the back room. He does not come back for some time. You remain seated. Your hands rest in your lap, but your fingers flex against the fabric. You are not surprised. You have been waiting for this. For months, maybe longer. Not for permission, but for clarity. For the veil to lift from a world that has grown too quiet, too reasonable, too cold. You rise slowly, your body heavy with everything you've lost and everything you might still become. The chest is exactly where you left it. Dust gathers on the corners and the lacquer has dulled slightly, but the shape remains the same, like a sealed memory waiting to be named again. You kneel before it, not out of ritual, but because your legs bend that way instinctively. Your fingers hesitate for a moment at the latch. Then you open it. The smell of old cloth and oiled steel rises like breath. Your sword lies inside, wrapped and untouched, but not forgotten. You draw it from the fabric with both hands, slowly, reverently. The weight of it surprises you, not because it is heavier, but because you've grown lighter without it. Hollowed. You feel your spine correct itself as you rise to your feet. You draw the blade from its sheath a few inches. The sound is quiet, clean, familiar. You do not smile. There is no joy in this. You hold it out in front of you, not raised, not lowered, simply present. A line traced through the air, separating what came before from what comes next. You breathe slowly, evenly. Your hands stop shaking only when you place the sword at your hip and tie the obi to hold it firm. Outside, the wind shifts. Leaves scatter across the path, like old letters blown loose from a forgotten archives. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and then goes quiet. The air feels clearer, but colder. You step outside into it, your sword against your hip, your breath steady. For the first time in years, you feel something that almost resembles purpose. Not pride, not courage. Something older, something shaped like duty but sharpened by despair. You do not know what victory looks like. You do not expect it, but you know what surrender feels like, and you are not ready to return to that yet. You don't leave with fanfare. No drums, no ceremony, no blessings. You gather your things before dawn, fold your clothes with care, bow to the family altar, and step into the morning mist with your sword at your side and your armour bundled in cloth. Your father does not walk you out, but he rises early to light the fire. He nods once as you pass, eyes steady, mouth drawn. Your mother hands you a wrapped parcel of rice and pickled vegetables and a water gourd. She says nothing as she ties the knot. Your youngest sibling watches from the doorway, too young to understand the weight in the room, but old enough to know it matters. You do not look back. You travel on foot because horses are too expensive and trains too humiliating. Your sandals wear thin after the first 2 days. By the third, the road is no longer paved and the fields grow sparse, but you're not alone. Others join from side paths, small groups at first, former students, clerks with calluses on their fingers, farmers with swords strapped awkwardly across their backs. They do not speak much, but their eyes meet yours in passing, and that is enough. You nod to each other, You recognise the same mixture of resolve and disbelief. None of you quite thought this moment would come, and yet none of you are surprised that it has. Your armour doesn't fit the way it used to. The lacquer has cracked in places, and the cords binding it together have dry rotted. You spend an afternoon retying parts with twine and thread your mother once used for mending futons. The chest plate still gleams faintly, though more from oil than polish. It's heavy, stiff, beautiful, in a way that feels useless. The helmet digs into your forehead, but you wear it anyway. You're not sure if it will stop a bullet, but it seems wrong to leave it behind. The sword you carry is not sharp enough for war, but it is sharp enough for memory, and that's almost the same thing now. By the time you reach the first gathering point, you are surrounded by hundreds. They sleep in rows on temple floors and in cleared rice fields, their breaths rising like mist in the cool spring air. Some wear full armour, others wear peasant clothes with bits of plating strapped over their shoulders or tied to their legs with rope. There are no uniforms, only the common colours of old cloth and fatigue. Saigo's banners fly over the main tent, hand-painted, tattered, held upright with bamboo poles. Men speak his name like a chant, low and rhythmic, as if the sound itself keeps them from unravelling. The officers are former retainers, educated and careful. They speak of strategy, honour, supply lines, discipline, but their voices are hoarse and their eyes sunken. They know what this is. No one says the word suicide, but it lingers behind every sentence. Still, the training resumes. Sword drills in the morning. Formations in the afternoon. You are assigned to a unit led by a man who once studied poetry in Edo. His armour is mismatched, but his grip on the hilt is sure. He teaches you how to move in formation, how to run without making noise, how to breathe while waiting for the charge. There is laughter in the evenings, nervous, brittle laughter that spills from the firelight and dies quickly in the dark. Men tell stories of what they were before, scribes, shopkeepers, sons. Some speak of revenge, others of restoration. A few admit they don't know why they're here, only that they couldn't bear the silence of staying behind. You speak little, but you listen. Every voice is a variation of the same grief, not over land or power, but over something harder to name. A way of being, a shared understanding, a life that no longer fits inside the borders of this country. You march with your unit toward Kumamoto, toward the first real engagement, the first test of whether lacquered armour and conviction can stand against factories and rifles. The road is muddy from spring rain. Your pack chafes your shoulders. Blisters bloom beneath the straps of your armour. But you do not stop. No one does. You walk because you must, because there is no place to return to if you turn around. The fields blur, the hills fold in behind you. The capital is too far to see, but you feel its weight in every step. The night before the first skirmish, you sleep beside a shrine with no statue left inside. The gods are gone or hiding. You run your fingers over the hilt of your sword and try to remember your training. Not the stances, not the forms, but the feeling. The sense that you once knew what your body was for, that it meant something to hold steel in your hands, that you were shaped by purpose instead of nostalgia. In the darkness, someone begins humming a song from childhood. It's out of tune, but no one stops them. At sunrise, you reach the edge of the battlefield. It does not look like a battlefield, just an open field, wet and uneven, dotted with fence posts and muddy trenches. There are no banners, no horns, only the smell of gunpowder and the hum of insects disturbed by movement. Your unit spreads out, crouches low, waits for the signal. Your heart beats too fast, your palms sweat through your gloves. You whisper a prayer to no one in particular, and then you see him. A boy, no older than your youngest brother, standing on the other side of the field in a blue-grey uniform that fits him too well. His rifle is steady, his cap is low, his boots are dry, He points the weapon toward your line without flinching. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't even look afraid. He looks like someone performing a task, someone completing a line of instruction from a training manual. You feel his eyes pass over you like you're part of the landscape. Not an enemy, not a threat, just an obstruction. You lower your gaze to the muzzle of the gun. It is clean, modern, unapologetic. The tip of your sword, by contrast, is dull, trembling slightly in your grip. You adjust your stance because that's what you were trained to do. But even as your knees lock and your shoulders square, you know this isn't a duel. It's a statement. One machine pointed at one relic. You do not speak. You do not charge. You wait for the future to fire first. He doesn't fire, not right away. The boy's rifle stays steady, his face unreadable, and for a moment you think he might lower it. That maybe he sees something familiar in your stance, your armor, your eyes. But then a voice shouts behind him, curt, mechanical, unquestioning, and the trigger is pulled. The shot misses, not by much. You flinch as the air beside your head splits open, and by the time you steady yourself, he's already turned away, already part of the formation again, already vanishing into smoke and shouted orders. You remain frozen for another breath, not from fear, but from clarity. Then you hear a cannon, a hollow, blunt noise that doesn't crack like thunder, but sinks low and slow into your chest. You don't see where it lands until the smoke clears, and by then it's only pieces of wood, of cloth, of someone you can't name now. The field turns soft beneath your sandals, not from rain, but from the churned, wet mixture of soil and things no one speaks about. There is no rhythm to this battle, no momentum, just noise, smoke, and sudden absences. Your unit is ordered to advance, but the word advance doesn't mean what it used to. There is no glorious charge. You walk in staggered lines through shallow trenches and ankle-deep mud, trying not to slip while bullets crack past your ears like mosquitoes with teeth. You're told to stay low, but your armour isn't built for crouching. Your shoulder plates dig into your neck, and your sword bumps awkwardly against your hip as you run, more a weight than a weapon now. You feel clumsy and loud, like a ceremonial figure pushed into a world that no longer uses ceremony. Around you, men fall. Some scream, some don't. The ones who scream tend to live longer, long enough to know they won't walk again, or hold a sword again, or be remembered beyond this hill. A boy from your village goes down beside you, his helmet rolling into the grass like a cast-off bowl. He reaches for his leg, and then for you, but your unit is already moving forward, and there is no pause, no room to pull him along. You do not speak his name. There isn't time. The air is thick with gunpowder and mud, and something else, something acrid that clings to your throat and makes every breath feel like inhaling smoke from wet pine. Your eyes sting, and not from tears. You blink fast, trying to keep your footing, trying to keep your formation, trying to remember what this was supposed to feel like. Not like this. You thought it would be sharper, cleaner, something honourable, even if doomed. But there's no honour here. Just velocity and noise. Someone blows a whistle, and you run. You don't know why, it doesn't matter. You run because the man next to you does. Because standing still means waiting for metal. You keep your sword sheathed. There's no one to swing at. The enemy is a blur of smoke and cloth and flashes of light. You fire a borrowed rifle once, feel it jam in your hands, and throw it into the mud without thinking. Your fingers instinctively return to your sword's hilt. It's the only weight that still makes sense, even if it serves no purpose. You crest a low rise and find yourself face to face with a line of imperial troops, boys mostly, in pressed uniforms and identical expressions. They fire in a coordinated volley, not because they hate you, but because they were told to. You drop to the ground a half second too late. The man behind you doesn't. You hear his breath leave his lungs before his body hits the ground. When you roll over, his chest is open and wet, and his blade is still tied to his side. It never left the scabbard. You crawl until the grass hides you, then lie still and listen. The battlefield sounds more like machinery than combat. Guns pop in rhythm. Cannons land in intervals. Orders are shouted in clipped voices, not roars but instructions. Everything is measured. Nothing is personal. You think of duels, of the forms you were taught, the stances you practiced, and realise none of them matter. You could be anyone. They could be anyone. The only difference between a samurai and a conscript now is how many layers of history are strapped to your shoulders when the bullet finds you. When night falls, the noise stops, but not the dying. You hear groans in the dark, wet, wheezing sobs. Some men cry out for their mothers. Others pray to gods who haven't responded in years. You crawl through bodies searching for anyone still breathing. Most are not. A few are, but barely. One asks you to finish it. You do not. You grip his hand until it goes limp, and try not to remember his name. Your unit regroups in a hollow behind the ridge. There are fewer of you now. No one counts. The officer says they'll try again in the morning, but his voice cracks on the word try, and he doesn't repeat it. No one eats, no one lights a fire. You sit in silence, your sword resting across your lap, like a relic from a temple, no longer standing. You don't know what to do with it. It's clean, unused, useless. You bury a friend just before dawn. His name is Kenta. You remember now. He once brought dried persimmons to training and shared them without asking. His smile always arrived before his words. You dig the hole with your hands because no one has shovels. The earth is wet and clings to your fingers like guilt. You lay him down gently, his arms crossed, his sword still sheathed. You consider removing it, but it feels wrong. He brought it with him. It should stay. He died wearing it, even if he never drew it. You place a flat stone over the grave, no name, no marker, just enough to keep the earth from forgetting too quickly. You do not pray, you do not cry, you press your palm to the stone and stand. The sun rises and nothing moves, no charge, no fresh orders, just the stillness that settles in when both sides have lost more than they counted on. You wait for the next cannon, the next burst of gunfire, but it doesn't come. The smoke hangs low over the field like fog, and the bodies don't get up. No one calls for reinforcements. No one sounds a retreat. The war for the moment pauses, not out of mercy, but from fatigue. You sit in the mud beside your sword and listen to the wind tug at the remains of a banner someone stopped trying to hold. You expect someone to tell you what to do next, but no one does. You stand slowly, legs aching, shoulders stiff, and rejoin what's left of your unit. You count fewer faces than you did yesterday. The officer doesn't speak, he just points south, and the march begins. No one calls it a retreat. It doesn't need a name. You walk because there's nowhere left to stand. It doesn't end with a final charge or a decisive loss. It thins, slowly, like blood draining into the floorboards. Not enough to alarm you at first, just enough that you start to notice the air growing colder. The supply carts stop coming. The messengers stop arriving. Ammunition grows scarce, then vanishes. Boots wear through, and replacements never appear. You begin to fight not for a cause, but for the chance to stay warm. The rice runs out, then the barley, then even the pickled scraps your mother packed weeks ago, now rotted into pulp. You boil roots, you chew grass. Someone suggests leather. Eventually, everyone agrees. The rain doesn't stop. It falls day after day, soft and relentless, until the earth becomes a paste that sucks at your feet and coats your armour in grime. Your sword rusts at the edge. You wipe it with the inside of your sleeve, which is already damp and threadbare. Fires are scarce, too risky, too visible, too wasteful. At night, you sleep curled around your knees, trying to trap what little body heat remains. Men wake coughing, some don't wake at all. You stop asking their names. Your commanding officer is replaced twice in a week. No one explains why. Orders come more slowly now, sometimes written on scraps of paper, sometimes relayed by a boy who doesn't remember the name of your unit. You march without knowing where you're going. You dig trenches without knowing who might attack. You fire into the fog at shadows. You retreat from nothing. Morale is no longer a word anyone uses. You have moved past that. You're operating now on something thinner, quieter, a sense of motion without meaning, obligation without hope. And still the enemy grows sharper. Their formations hold. Their uniforms are clean. They rotate troops with mathematical precision. Always fresh, always fed. They move by timetable, not instinct. They speak in clipped phrases and follow instructions from men who never see the front. You kill fewer of them now, not because you lack courage, but because you lack opportunity. You do not meet them in battle. You meet them in glimpses, a flicker of movement, a shot from a hill you thought was empty, a flash of blue-grey disappearing into the trees, leaving one of yours bleeding in the snow. The cold worsens. You stop feeling your fingers some mornings. Your breath becomes steam even in the afternoons. Rations are gone. You eat bark, then nothing. A man collapses during a march and doesn't get up. No one stops walking. The officer looks back once, then keeps moving. Later, when you double back for him, you find only his sandals in the mud. You do not wonder where he went. You already know. He became part of the landscape, like the rest of you. More men surrender, not all at once, just in pairs, in silence. You wake one morning and the man who slept beside you is gone. His armour folded neatly, his sword driven halfway into the ground, like a marker stone. Some head north, hoping for mercy. Others go west, hoping for food. You stay, not because of loyalty, but because you can't imagine any other direction. The rebellion has shrunk to a rumour, and you are now its echo. When you're finally forced to fall back toward Kagoshima, you find the outskirts already occupied. Government posts line the roads. Bureaucrats in thick coats monitor foot traffic, marking down the names of refugees, the quantities of confiscated weapons, the conditions of surrendered soldiers. You're not captured, not yet. You're corralled, filed, indexed. You realize quickly that you are not being treated as an enemy. You're being treated as paperwork. You pass a checkpoint where a clerk writes your name, not in brushwork, but with a pencil, on a form that already has a printed header. He asks your age. He asks if you're literate. He does not ask why you fought. He does not care. He checks a box beside your name and waves you through. The man behind you receives a different mark and is pulled aside. You don't see him again. You're herded into a makeshift holding area, a fenced rice field with tarp stretched overhead and chalk lines drawn on the mud to indicate sleeping zones. Men sit shoulder to shoulder, eating watery soup from tin bowls stamped with government seals. Some have no boots, others wear scraps of old uniforms or sleep wrapped in damp flags. The guards do not bark orders, they do not threaten, they just count. Over and over, head counts, bedroll counts, ration slips. You stop being a person, you become a figure in a ledger. You hear that Saigo still holds a position, further south, surrounded but unbroken. No one knows for certain. Some say he's negotiating surrender, others say he plans a final stand. A few believe he's already dead. You don't argue. Hope has become theoretical. It belongs to men who haven't filled out forms. One evening, you watch a line of prisoners board a train. They move slowly, not from injury, but from confusion. Some have never seen a train before. The carriages are metal, windowless, marked with stencils that don't translate into words you understand. Each man is called by name, then by number. A clerk reads from a list, another checks a box. One by one, they ascend the steps and vanish behind the sliding doors. No shackles, no guards inside, just a sealed fate with assigned coordinates. You realise this isn't a transport, it's a filing cabinet. You stand behind a split rail fence and try to understand what kind of war ends with a clipboard. How rebellion dissolves not in blood or fire, but in signatures and sealed envelopes. You wonder what happens to the forms once they're filled. If they're stored somewhere, or simply burned. You imagine your name typed at the top of a page, followed by a list of traits. Former samurai, compliant, underfed. You wonder if there's a space for dignity. You doubt it. Later that night, a guard brings you a blanket. He doesn't speak, just drops it in your lap and moves on. You don't thank him. You lie down on your chalk line and stare at the tarp above, listening to the wind tug at its corners. You're not dead. You're not even defeated, not officially, but you can feel it now, the shape of surrender when it's built from forms instead of flags. You close your eyes and try to remember the sound of your sword being drawn. You can't. All you hear now is the scratch of a pencil on paper. The final march is not announced. There is no trumpet, no banner, no final speech, just another day of walking, quiet, cold, unmarked by direction. You pass through fields without crops, villages without people, and valleys where only the wind seems to remember the war. The roads become thinner, then they stop altogether. Eventually, the dirt path gives way to gravel, and the gravel becomes slope. You climb not because you're ordered to, but because it's the only place left that hasn't been taken. The others follow, not with purpose, but with gravity. Shiroyama is more ridge than fortress, a sloping hill overlooking Kagoshima Bay, ringed with pine and mist and old stone. It isn't fortified, it isn't strategic, but it's high ground, and in your condition, that feels like something. Fewer than 400 make it to the top. Some count only 370. No one agrees on the number, and no one counts twice. You recognize a few faces. Men who once drilled beside you. Men who once issued orders. Most are too thin now to look familiar. You nod at them anyway. There is still honor in pretending. The mood on the hill is not one of defiance. It is something quieter. No one sharpens blades. No one checks their rifles. Men sit in small clusters, not speaking. The wind is sharp and the sun weak, casting long shadows across armor that no longer gleams. You see a man you trained with trying to fix a crack in his helmet with pine resin. Another man breaks his last arrow in half to use it as a tent peg. The ground is hard, the air thin, and the only thing that feels certain is how little remains. Saigo is here, though few see him directly. He stays in a tent near the centre of the encampment, surrounded by what's left of his officers. Rumours pass like wind, that he's wounded, that he's writing a final letter to the Emperor, that he already knows how this ends. Some say he intends to charge. Others say he won't live to see morning. No one speaks against him. Even now, after all of it, his name still holds the last scraps of cohesion. You don't need to hear from him. You know what he would say. It's already written across the faces of the men beside you. You find a place near the eastern edge of the slope, between two large stones and a gnarled pine whose roots twist through the dirt like veins. It's sheltered from the wind and far enough from the command tent to avoid scrutiny. You lay out your mat, fold your cloak over it, and place your sword beside you. The edge is dull, but you clean it anyway. Not because you expect to use it effectively, but because it would feel wrong to leave it dirty. You rub the hilt with cloth until your hands stop trembling. Then you sit, knees drawn up, and watch the trees shift in the breeze. Below the hill, Imperial soldiers move like clockwork. You can see them from your perch, little blue-grey figures in perfect columns, digging trenches, mounting artillery, stringing telegraph wire through the trees. They are precise, calm, professional. You watch one officer mark distances on a map, while another aligns a cannon with a plumb line. There is no urgency, no heat, just the quiet, relentless efficiency of men building a machine, and you are the thing they intend to grind into powder. Someone brings dried rice husks and a few damp sticks to start a fire, but it never catches properly. The wind is too strong, or the fuel too tired. You huddle around the smoke anyway, as if it means warmth. One man jokes that he's forgotten how to feel his fingers. Another wonders aloud what day of the week it is. No one answers either of them. The smoke stings your eyes and vanishes into the dark. You do not add anything to the fire. You've run out of things to burn. You mend your armour with string, not because you think it will matter, but because your hands need something to do. You patch a crack in the chest plate with a strip of cloth cut from your cloak. You retie the cords at your shoulder with knots that won't hold up under stress. It doesn't matter. The armour is no longer protection. It's costume. You wear it not to survive, but to remember what survival once looked like. Someone begins to chant sutras a few rows over. His voice is thin but steady. The sound carries through the cold, brushing lightly against the ears of those around him. A few men join in. A few more bow their heads. You do not speak, but you listen. Not for the words, but for the silence beneath them. The quiet acceptance, the lack of protest, the knowledge that there is no one left to bargain with. You lie down beside the cold fire, wrapping your cloak around your shoulders and tucking your hands beneath your arms. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your legs throb from the march. Your ribs still hurt from a fall you never mentioned to anyone. You press your cheek against the woven mat and close your eyes. You do not expect to sleep, but your body is too tired to resist. The air smells like damp pine, sweat, and resignation. You dream of nothing. The light comes slowly, not with fire or brilliance, but with a greyness that seeps into your bones before it touches the ground. Dawn does not break. It drips, thin and cold and deliberate. You wake not because you're ready, but because there's movement around you. Quiet footsteps, the soft creak of leather, the hollow rattle of loose armour plates being adjusted for the last time. No one speaks. Words are too sharp this morning. They'd cut through the calm like a mistake. You sit up slowly, shoulders stiff, legs tight from the night's cold. Your fingers tremble as you reach for your sword. Not from fear, just from fatigue. The cloth-wrapped hilt feels familiar in your hand, but unfamiliar in your life. You draw it not for use, but for principle. The blade is clean, but dull. It reflects no light, offers no promise, answers no questions. Still, it stays in your grip. You will not leave it behind. Men begin to gather, lining up without instruction. You know most of their faces now, not by name, but by posture. A man with a missing ear stands beside one who limps with every other step. A boy who barely shaves holds a spear so cracked it bends in the middle. Someone has brought a banner, but it's torn and too heavy to lift properly. The fabric trails in the dirt like something ashamed of itself. At the front, Saigo appears, not in armour, but in plain robes. He walks with help now, one hand resting on the shoulder of a younger man, the other pressed to his side. Rumours of his wound were true. He is pale but composed. He says nothing as he passes, just a slow nod. That's enough. The line begins to move. You descend the hill together, not like an army, but like mourners leaving a funeral early. No war cries rise, no drums beat, just footsteps, shuffling, sliding, soft thuds of soles on gravel, the sound of old armour brushing old cloth, the rhythm of a tradition breathing its last. The government soldiers are waiting. You see them through the trees, lining the ridge below, with rifles levelled and expressions unreadable. They do not look angry. They do not look afraid. They simply look ready. You imagine some of them are younger than your sword. Some of them have never seen a blade drawn in earnest. They're dressed in Western uniforms, caps, coats, boots, and none of them stand alone. They are units, not men. You feel the first shot before you hear it. Not yours, theirs. Somewhere to your left, a man cries out and drops to his knees, clutching his throat with both hands. He doesn't rise again. Another shot, then another. The line stumbles but does not stop. There is no command to charge. You move forward because stopping would mean having to think. A bullet tears through the air just past your shoulder. You flinch, purely out of reflex. The man beside you falls backward, a red stain blooming across his chest, like spilled ink. You do not stop to help him. You do not look back. This is not that kind of war. You tighten your grip on the sword, your feet strike uneven earth, soft in some places, jagged in others, and the smell of smoke begins to creep into your lungs. Somewhere ahead, someone reaches the enemy line. You hear metal clash against metal, then stop. You do not hear the man again. You move faster now, if only to reach the end sooner. The field narrows, trees closing in on both sides. Your breath rasps in your throat. You feel your heart pounding in your chest. Not with adrenaline, but with the effort of carrying so much weight for so little purpose. And then it happens. You don't see the shooter. You don't hear the rifle. You only feel the impact, sharp, hot, deep in your shoulder. Your body twists from the force, knees buckling beneath you. Your vision tilts. You stumble forward, and a second shot finds you, lower this time, somewhere near your hip. Your legs forget how to move. You drop to your knees, sword still in hand, though your fingers begin to slacken. The ground is cold, damp. You smell moss, blood, and gunpowder. Someone screams. Someone chants a name. You do neither. You're too tired. Around you others fall. Some crawl, some simply sit down. Backs against trees, swords across laps, waiting for it to end. The line thins into fragments. The charge becomes a drift. The battle becomes a silence. You try to stand, but your legs no longer respond. You reach for the sword and fail to lift it. The edge presses into the dirt. You press your hand to your wound. It's wet. You don't need to look. You know. You tip sideways, cheek to earth. You stare at the base of a pine tree, its roots curled tight around a stone. An ant crawls across a fallen twig. The breeze brushes your face. Distantly, you hear more gunfire, but none of it feels like it belongs to you anymore. Your breath shortens, not in sudden gasps, not with any drama. It's just that the space between one breath and the next starts to stretch too long. You count them without meaning to. One, then another, then a pause that feels like it might be the last, but it isn't. You inhale again, shallow and sharp, and you wonder, vaguely, distantly, if this is what drowning feels like. Not frantic, not violent, just slow. You blink against the sun. It's too bright. Not beautiful, not poetic, just unfiltered and uncaring. There's no final beam of light, no soft breeze to carry your name away. There's only the white blur of daylight in your eyes and the sting of sweat running sideways along your temple. Your head is twisted awkwardly on the ground. You can't lift it. You can't turn to see how many are left. You can't even feel your legs anymore. Someone nearby is moaning, not words, just sound. A raw, animal sort of pain. You don't look toward it. You couldn't if you wanted to. Your shoulder pulses with a dull, rhythmic ache, but even that begins to slip away. The pain fades before you do. What's left is heavy and quiet. You're not scared. You thought you would be. But there's nothing in your chest except tiredness. A kind of dull, worn-out silence where fear should be. Your sword is still beside you, half buried in the grass, but you can't feel your hand anymore. The blade doesn't catch the sun. It's dull. Just another forgotten object lying in the dirt. You wonder if someone will take it. Not to honour you, just to sell it. Melt it down. Hang it on a wall and lie about where it came from. You wonder how long it will take for your name to leave your family's memory. 2 generations? Maybe 3? That's not long. A soldier walks past your body. You hear the crunch of gravel under his boots, the metallic jingle of gear, the faint static of something electric crackling on his belt. He doesn't look at you, doesn't slow down, doesn't check if you're breathing. To him, you're already part of the terrain, no different from a rock or a tree root, just something to step around. You don't blame him. You wouldn't look at you either. The world moves on around you. You hear shouting in the distance, clipped commands, rifles being reloaded, orders about bodies, not the kind of orders you understand, not the kind that need translation. The New Japan speaks in numbers and paperwork now. Forms to record the dead, tags to label what's left. No one's chanting your name. No one's composing a death poem in your honour. No one's even sure which one you were. You think maybe that you were supposed to feel something more. Glory, regret, peace. But what you feel is the dirt beneath your cheek, the way it sticks to your skin, the way the earth presses back, indifferent and cool. The wind brushes your fingers, and you can't quite tell if they move in response. You want to blink again, but your eyes have already closed. You try to open them. You can't remember how. There is no great silence, no final stillness that overtakes the battlefield. The noise keeps going. Gunfire in the distance, boots stomping closer, voices calling roll. You are not the end of anything. You are not the last thread of a grand tapestry. You are a loose thread, cut clean. The cloth holds without you. There is no monument being raised, no chronicler writing your name in ink. History will record the Satsuma Rebellion as a footnote, a paragraph between telegraph wires and tax reforms. They will call it romantic, noble even. They will name Saigo the last samurai, though he dies behind a tent curtain, not on the hill beside you. They will carve his name in stone. They will carve yours in nothing. Your mother will never know how it happened. The letter will arrive weeks too late, written by someone who didn't see your face. It will say, fallen in service or lost in action, or some other phrase crafted to sound meaningful and hollow at the same time. Your father will fold the paper in half, once, then again, and set it beside your sword chest without opening it. Your name will be burned with incense. The memory will linger, then fade. A crow lands near your feet, not close enough to touch you, just close enough to consider it. Its head tilts. It steps once, twice, then hops away, bored. Your blood has stopped spreading. The soil has taken it. The grass will grow regardless. No one calls you brave. No one calls you anything. The men who still breathe are too busy stacking the bodies. Yours will be moved, probably, eventually. Tagged, maybe. Buried, maybe not. Some clerk will write a number on a sheet and assign you a location. Row 3, plot 7, or something like that. You won't know. You don't get to know. You die with your eyes closed and your mouth half open. There is no final breath, not that anyone can tell, just a quiet pause between moments, stretching so long that even the sky forgets you were ever part of it. That brings us to the end of tonight's slow descent into a life left behind by time. If you're still listening, thank you for walking alongside someone the world was already forgetting, a man trained for a future that never came, buried without a name, and folded quietly into the landscape of modernity. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet, unflinching glimpses into history's discarded lives, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lamke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.